She didn't lose her job in a normal way. She lost it in front of people who smiled while it happened, like they'd been waiting. Now Emma needs one thing she never thought she'd have to prove to keep her child: stability. And the stranger who overhears her desperate phone call doesn't just feel sorry for her. He makes an offer that could destroy them both. Before we begin, if stories like this matter to you, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's free. It helps us a lot. And now, let's begin. The first thing Emma noticed was the way his voice cut through the restaurant noise. Calm, steady, like a hand reaching into deep water. "I'm serious," the stranger said. "If you need a husband, I'll do it." Emma froze mid-step, a tray balanced on her palm, her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and humiliation. She stared at him. Her cheeks burned. "Excuse me?" Across the booth, her co-worker's eyebrows lifted in pure shock. Behind the counter, the manager looked up like he'd just heard a glass break. The stranger, Greg, didn't flinch. He didn't grin. He didn't look like he was playing a joke to get a waitress's reaction. He looked bothered. Like something about Emma's voice a moment ago had gotten under his skin. Emma's hand trembled. The tray dipped. A water glass wobbled, then tipped. "Whoa," she whispered. Greg's hand shot out without thinking. He caught the glass before it hit the table, water sloshing over his knuckles. Emma's eyes widened. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." "It's fine," Greg said quickly. "It's just water." It wasn't just water to Emma. It was proof. Proof that her body didn't feel like hers anymore, that her nerves were always buzzing, that her life had become one long moment of almost dropping everything. She set the tray down with care, as if it might explode. I think you misunderstood what you heard." Greg leaned back slightly, finally blinking, like someone coming back into his own mind. "I heard enough." Emma's throat tightened. She forced her voice to stay steady, even as her hand shook under the apron. "You overheard a private call?" "I know," he said. "And I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I was sitting there, and—" He nodded toward the bar side. "You were near the hallway. I heard you say, you need to show stability to keep your child." The word child hit her like a punch. Emma's posture changed instantly. Like an invisible shield rose up from her spine. "That's not your business." "I know it isn't." Greg's gaze softened. "But I also heard you say you were humiliated, that you lost your career, that you're being forced into something you don't want." Emma's lips parted, but no sound came, because it was true, and because hearing it repeated out loud, in public, made her want to disappear. Behind her, someone laughed at another table, bright and careless. The contrast made everything sharper, like Emma's pain was the only real thing in the room. She swallowed hard. "I need to get back to work." Greg didn't grab her arm, didn't block her path. He just said quietly, "My name is Greg, and I'm not trying to embarrass you. I'm trying to help." Emma's laugh came out wrong, too tight, too bitter. "By marrying me?" He held her gaze. "Yes." Emma stared at him like he had grown a second head. Her co-worker, Lila, leaned closer and whispered, "Please tell me this man is a movie producer." Emma didn't even blink. "I don't know him." Greg looked at Lila politely. "I'm not a movie producer." Lila's face fell. "Oh." Greg's attention returned to Emma. "I know how insane it sounds, I do. But—" He hesitated, then spoke with a kind of honesty that didn't feel rehearsed. "My sister went through something similar. She lost her job in a way that wasn't fair, and then her ex used it against her. He tried to paint her as unstable." Emma's chest tightened, something aching in a place she couldn't name. Greg continued, "I watched my sister fall apart, trying to prove she wasn't falling apart." Emma's eyes stung. She looked down fast, pretending to adjust her apron strap. "I'm not—" she started, but her voice cracked. She cleared her throat. "I'm not asking anyone to save me." Greg nodded once, like he respected that. "I didn't say you were." Emma lifted her chin, trying to rebuild herself in real time. "Then what are you doing?" Greg's jaw clenched, like the answer cost him something. I'm offering you a way to get your breath back." There was silence. It lasted long enough for Emma to hear the restaurant's little sounds again, silverware clinking, the sizzle from the kitchen, the tiny squeak of someone's shoes on tile. Emma's mind raced. Stranger, trap, scam, humiliation, part 2. But then she looked at him. Greg wasn't dressed flashy, no expensive suit, no showy watch, just a dark sweater, neat but simple. His hair was slightly messy, like he'd run his hands through it too many times. His eyes were tired in a way that wasn't about sleep. He looked like a man who carried responsibility like a second spine. Emma whispered, "You don't even know me." Greg answered gently, "Then tell me." Emma's heart thumped. "What?" "Tell me what you need," he said, "and if I'm wrong, you can walk away. But if I'm right—" He paused. "Maybe you don't have to do this alone." Emma's breath caught because she almost did it. She almost told him everything, and that terrified her. She stepped back. "I can't." Greg nodded again, like he expected that. "Okay." Emma turned quickly, tray in hand, moving toward the counter as if her life depended on it. Because in a way, it did. Lila followed her, eyes huge. "Emma, who is that? Do you know him? Is he crazy? Are you crazy?" Emma's hands shook as she grabbed the order pad. "I don't know him." "But he said he'd marry you," Lila whispered, half delighted, half horrified. "That's not normal." Emma forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Nothing in my life is normal right now." Lila's voice softened. "Is it about the custody thing?" Emma's stomach dropped. She looked at Lila sharply. "You don't know anything." Lila held up her hands. Okay. I'm sorry. You've been different." Emma exhaled through her nose, fighting the urge to cry. "I'm just tired." Lila hesitated. "Is he cute?" Emma stared at her, stunned, then let out a small, broken laugh. It surprised her. Even in this mess, her best friend could still be Lila, completely inappropriate at the worst time. Emma shook her head. "Yes, he's objectively cute, which makes this worse." Lila's face lit up. "It always makes it worse." "Alit." Emma pressed her lips together, trying not to smile again, because smiling felt dangerous. Like if she smiled, she'd forget how close she was to losing everything. She glanced back toward the booth. Greg was still there, sitting quietly, hands folded like he wasn't in a rush, like he wasn't a man who'd just offered to marry a stranger. And that was the strangest part. He looked patient. Emma looked away fast, because patience right now felt like temptation. 2 hours later, the dinner rush thinned. Emma's feet hurt. Her hair was coming loose from the clip. Her apron smelled like fries and coffee and exhaustion. She clocked out with the slow movements of someone whose body had been working while her mind stayed somewhere else. In the back hallway near the storage room, she pulled her phone out and stared at her last call. Marianne Collins, attorney. Emma's chest tightened again. She stepped outside into the cold air behind the restaurant, letting the winter bite her cheeks like punishment. She hit redial. It rang twice before Marianne picked up. "Emma," Marianne said immediately, voice brisk. "I was waiting for your call," Emma swallowed. I couldn't talk inside. "I figured. Are you safe?" Emma's laugh came out thin. "I'm behind a diner, so yes, technically." Marianne didn't laugh. She never did when it mattered. "We need a plan," she said, "and I need you to listen to me carefully." Emma leaned her head against the brick wall, eyes closed. "I'm listening." Marianne's voice dropped into that tone lawyers use when they're about to hand you reality unwrapped. "The other side is arguing that your recent job loss is evidence of instability." Emma's throat tightened. "It wasn't my fault." "I know," Marianne said, "but court isn't always about truth. It's about presentation." Emma's stomach turned. "So what do I do?" Marianne paused, then said, "We need to show the judge a stable environment, a support system, consistency." Emma's fingers curled around the phone. I have a home, I have a routine, You have a new job as a waitress, Marianne cut in gently but firmly, and we both know your ex will weaponize that. He'll say you're struggling, that you've fallen. Emma's eyes stung. She stared at the dark sky as if it might give her an answer. Marianne continued, Emma, I don't like saying this, but your ex has resources. He has people. He has charm. And he has a strategy. Emma's voice went small. He doesn't even want Noah. That doesn't matter, Marianne said. He wants control. Emma closed her eyes harder. Noah, her son, 6 years old. Big eyes, loud laugh, little hands that still reached for her without doubt. She could not let anyone take him. Marianne's tone softened slightly. Has anyone new come into your life? Any steady partner? Someone who can testify that you have stability? Emma froze. Because her brain instantly flashed to Greg's calm face and tired eyes, and the way his hand caught that glass without thinking. Emma whispered, No. Marianne sighed. Okay, then we build stability another way. But Emma, if there were a partner, if you were married. Emma's breath hitched. Marianne. I'm not telling you to get married, Marianne said quickly. I'm saying judges are human. They see married and they think structure. It's unfair, but it happens. Emma stared at the ground, suddenly dizzy. And then, because her life had turned into a twisted joke, Emma heard herself say, barely audible, What if there was someone willing? Marianne went still. Emma, what? Emma's heart pounded so hard it felt loud. I'm not saying there is, Emma rushed. I'm saying hypothetically. Marianne exhaled slowly. Hypothetically, it could help. But it can't be fake, not in a way they can expose, because if your ex proves fraud, you could lose everything. Emma felt cold all the way through. She whispered, Okay. Marianne's voice softened again. Emma, what happened at your last job? We're still fighting that. Your termination was suspicious, and I'm not dropping it. Emma's jaw tightened. They made me look like I stole from the company. I know, Marianne said, and we're going to prove you didn't. Emma squeezed her eyes shut. That day played behind her eyelids like a cruel highlight reel. The conference room, the HR woman's smile, the boss's voice, smooth as silk. Emma, we've reviewed the footage. Footage that didn't show what they said, it showed. The whispering outside the glass walls, the humiliation, the words, terminated immediately. And then the final knife, the boss's fake sympathy. I'm sure you'll land on your feet. Emma's voice trembled. I need my feet, Marianne. I need my son. You'll keep him, Marianne said, firm, but you have to stay steady. No mistakes, no impulsive decisions. Emma swallowed. No impulsive decisions. She hung up and stared at the phone screen until it went dark. And then she felt it, movement behind her, a shadow shifting near the corner of the building. Emma's body stiffened. She turned sharply. Greg stood there, hands in his coat pockets, keeping a respectful distance, like he didn't want to scare her. Emma, he said softly. Her heart slammed. Were you listening? Greg's face tightened with guilt. Not on purpose. I was waiting to talk to you. And I heard my name. Well, I thought I heard something and... Emma hugged her arms around herself. That call was private. I know, Greg's voice was honest. I'm sorry. Emma stared at him angry and exhausted and scared all at once. Why are you still here? Greg didn't smile. He didn't flirt. He didn't do anything to make it feel like a game. He said simply, because you looked like someone standing on the edge of something, and I didn't want to walk away if I could help. Emma's throat tightened. I don't need pity. I'm not giving you pity, Greg said. I'm giving you an option. Emma let out a shaky breath. You don't even know if I'm a good person. Greg tilted his head slightly. I watched you in there. You apologized when you didn't have to. You were patient when customers were rude. You smiled even when you looked like you might cry. Emma's eyes stung again. She hated that her emotions were so close to the surface now. Greg continued, voice lower. And when you were on the phone, you didn't sound selfish. You sounded terrified. Emma swallowed. Terrified is accurate. Greg's gaze softened. What's your son's name? Emma hesitated. Every instinct screamed, don't tell him. But another part of her, smaller, quieter, whispered, he already knows you have one. And he looks like he cares. She said, Noah? Greg nodded once, as if that name meant something. How old? 6. Greg's jaw flexed, like he was holding back a reaction. My sister's boy is 6. Emma blinked. Your sister really went through this? Greg's eyes darkened with memory. Yes, different details. Same cruelty. Emma looked at him, trying to see the catch. Greg took a slow breath. Emma, I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. I'm asking you to let me explain. Emma's laugh came out weak. Explain how you're offering marriage to a stranger behind a diner. Greg's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Yeah, when you say it like that, it sounds worse. Despite herself, Emma felt a tiny, unexpected flicker of amusement. It was so small it barely existed, but it was there, and that scared her too. Greg nodded toward the employee entrance. Can we talk somewhere less tragic? Emma looked around. The cold air, the dumpsters, the lonely backlight buzzing overhead. She muttered, This is definitely the most romantic place I've ever been proposed to. Greg's face softened, and this time he actually smiled, small, genuine, almost relieved. Good, he said, because I was worried you'd say you get this a lot. Emma's laugh slipped out before she could stop it. It sounded strange, like a sound from a different version of her. Greg watched her like he'd just seen a crack in the wall she'd built around herself. And for one dangerous second, Emma wondered what it would feel like to lean into that crack, to rest, to breathe. Then reality slammed back in. Emma's smile faded. I can't do something stupid, she whispered. Greg's eyes held hers. Then don't. Emma frowned. What? Greg stepped closer, but not too close. Just enough that she could hear him clearly. He said, If we do this, it won't be stupid. It will be strategic, controlled, legal, honest in the ways that matter. Emma's heart pounded. Honest? Greg nodded. I can't stand lies that hurt people, but I can stand an arrangement that protects someone who's being harmed. Emma searched his face. Why do you care this much? Greg's gaze dropped for a moment. When he looked back up, his expression was raw. Because, he said quietly, I didn't help my sister fast enough, and I promised myself I wouldn't watch it happen again. Emma's throat tightened. She didn't know this man, but she knew that kind of regret. It lived in a person's voice, in the way they chose words carefully, like they'd learned the cost of carelessness. Emma swallowed hard. Okay, she whispered. Explain. Greg nodded toward the front of the building. There's a coffee shop across the street, bright lights, cameras, public, safe. Emma hesitated, then she nodded once. Okay, she said again, quieter. They walked side by side around the building, and as they turned the corner, Emma's foot caught on the uneven sidewalk. She stumbled. Oh! Her body lurched forward. Greg reacted instantly, arm moving out like a reflex. He caught her, not with a tight grip, not possessive, just steady, supportive, a hand at her elbow and another briefly at her waist to keep her from falling. Emma froze in his hold, because his warmth was real, because for a second she felt held, and because when she looked up, Greg was already looking at her, not like a stranger, like someone who could see her. Their faces were close enough that Emma could see the tiny crease at the corner of his eye, like he smiled often, but not recently. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Emma stepped back quickly, cheeks hot. I'm fine, she said too fast. Greg released her immediately, hands lifting slightly like surrender. Okay. Emma cleared her throat. The sidewalk is evil, Greg said, deadpan. Emma blinked. Greg continued seriously, We should sue it. Emma let out a small laugh, then slapped her hand lightly against her own forehead, like she couldn't believe she was laughing at all. Greg's eyes softened. "There," he said quietly. "That sound. You deserve more of that." Emma's smile faded again, but something in her chest shifted, like a locked door loosening. She whispered, "Don't say things like that." Greg's voice lowered. "Why?" Emma looked away. "Because I might start believing them." Greg didn't answer. He just opened the coffee shop door for her, and Emma walked inside into warmth, light, and the most impossible conversation of her life. The coffee shop was too bright for the kind of conversation Emma was about to have. Warm light poured over the counters, over the glass case of pastries, over couples laughing softly at small tables like life was simple, like nothing had ever been taken from them in a single afternoon. Emma felt like she didn't belong in that kind of light. Greg held the door for her, then followed, scanning the room with a quick, instinctive awareness that made him seem trained, or at least used to being careful. Emma chose a table in the back corner, half hidden behind a tall potted plant, because if she was going to discuss marrying a stranger, she wanted the plant to witness it first. Greg sat across from her, leaving a respectful distance, not leaning into her space, not trying to charm her. That was the first thing that made her nervous, because charm was what she knew how to fight. This quiet steadiness. She didn't have a defense for it yet. A barista walked up with a bright smile. "What can I get you guys?" Emma flinched at the word guys, like they were already a couple, like the world would happily label them without caring whether it was true. Greg spoke first. "Black coffee, please," Emma swallowed. "Chamomile tea." The barista nodded. "Coming right up." The moment she left, the silence returned. Emma stared at the table surface like it might provide legal advice. Greg waited. Finally, Emma exhaled. "Okay, talk." Greg nodded once, as if he'd been bracing himself for permission. "I'm going to start with the simplest truth," Greg said. "You don't know me. You have no reason to trust me. So if at any point this feels unsafe or wrong, you stand up and walk away." Emma's throat tightened. "I like that rule." Greg's mouth twitched faintly. "Good." Emma crossed her arms. "Now explain what you're offering and why I shouldn't assume you're either crazy or dangerous." Greg didn't look offended. He looked like he expected it. "Fair," he said. "I'm not dangerous. I'm stubborn, and I have a strong allergy to watching good people get crushed." Emma's eyes narrowed. "That sounds like something dangerous people would say." Greg blinked, then nodded. "Also fair." Emma almost smiled, but she held it back. "Try again." Greg leaned back slightly, hands folded on the table. "My sister's name is Nora." Emma's stomach tightened at the coincidence. Greg continued, "Nora was brilliant, funny, a little reckless, but in a way that made life brighter. She married a man who was perfect on paper." Emma's jaw clenched. "And not perfect in real life." Greg's gaze darkened. He was charming, strategic. He never raised his voice. He never left bruises. He left doubt. Emma felt a chill crawl up her spine. Greg's voice stayed calm, but something inside it sharpened. When she finally tried to leave, he did what men like that do. He made her the problem. Emma's fingers curled. "How?" Greg's jaw flexed. He used her job against her, her finances, her stress. He created situations that made her look unstable. And then he smiled in court like he was the victim. Emma's throat went tight, because it was too familiar. Greg watched her carefully. "Emma, I'm not guessing. Your voice on that phone call, it sounded like you're being cornered by someone who knows how to corner." Emma swallowed. "My ex is charming." Greg nodded once, like he already knew. "That's the most dangerous kind." Emma exhaled slowly. "So your solution is to marry me?" Greg hesitated for the first time, then said quietly, "My solution is to give you the advantage you don't currently have." Emma's eyes burned. "That advantage being A man? Greg's gaze held hers. No, he said firmly. The advantage being a structure the court respects unfairly, but it does. And if your ex is using unfair tools, you're allowed to defend yourself with reality. Emma's voice shook. But it wouldn't be reality. Greg's expression softened. It could be. Emma froze. Excuse me? Greg's eyes didn't flicker. I'm not offering you a fake marriage with fake vows and fake affection. I'm offering you a partnership, one with rules, boundaries, a purpose, and honesty, where we can. Emma felt her heart pound, confused and angry, and strangely pulled. She whispered, "You're a stranger." Greg nodded. "Right now? Yes." Emma scoffed. "And in what world does that become a partnership?" Greg's answer came quietly. "In the world where two people decide to stop being strangers." Emma stared at him. She hated that those words landed in her chest like a soft impact. She hated it more that she didn't push them away. The barista returned with their drinks, placing the mug and tea carefully, oblivious to the war happening at this table. "Here you go," she said cheerfully. "Enjoy." Emma forced a smile. "Thank you." The barista walked away. Emma wrapped both hands around the teacup, letting warmth sink into her fingers as if her body didn't trust comfort anymore. She looked at Greg. "What do you do, Greg?" Greg blinked as if he expected that question. "I'm an operations manager." Emma's eyebrows lifted. "Of what?" "A private security firm," he said. Emma froze. Her brain screamed, "Of course." Greg held up a hand. "Not the dramatic kind. We do corporate security, personal protection, risk assessments, things like that. It's mostly planning and prevention." Emma's mouth went dry. "So you're trained?" Greg's eyes softened. "I'm trained to notice danger, yes. That's why I noticed you." Emma swallowed hard. She didn't like how safe that sounded. Safety was addictive. Emma forced herself to stay sharp. "Why were you in the diner?" Greg's lips pressed together. "I live nearby, and I sometimes go there when I need to think." Emma narrowed her eyes. "That's not an answer." Greg exhaled, then said quietly, "My father died last month." Emma's chest tightened. Greg's gaze dropped to his coffee. "The diner is where he used to take me when I was a kid. It's not rational. It just anchors me." Emma's throat tightened, because grief was another language she understood. She said softly, "I'm sorry." Greg looked up, surprised by her softness. "Thank you." A silence passed, gentler now, less hostile. Then Emma's defenses snapped back. She set the tea down. "Okay. Let's pretend for 1 second that I don't think this is insane." Greg's mouth twitched faintly. "Okay." Emma leaned forward slightly. "What's in it for you?" Greg didn't hesitate. "Peace." Emma blinked. "Peace?" Greg nodded once. "The kind you get when you do something that matters. The kind my sister deserved and didn't get fast enough." Emma studied him, suspicious. "That's noble." Greg's eyes met hers. "It's not noble. It's guilt." Emma's chest tightened again. Greg continued, voice steady, "But I'm not offering this to punish myself. I'm offering it because I believe it can help you, and because I don't like your ex already." Emma's lips parted. "You don't even know him?" Greg took a sip of coffee. "I know the type," Emma swallowed. "And what type am I?" Greg's gaze softened. "The type who's trying not to fall apart in public." Emma's eyes stung so fast she almost panicked. She looked away quickly. Greg didn't press. He let her have space. That, somehow, made the tears more dangerous. Emma took a slow breath, then forced her voice firm. "If I even consider this, I need to know the rules." Greg nodded immediately. "Good. I already thought about that." Emma's eyebrows lifted. "Of course you did." Greg's mouth twitched. "Occupational hazard." Emma hesitated, then said, "Start." Greg folded his hands. "Rule 1. You and your son come first. Always." Emma's throat tightened. Greg continued, Rule 2, no pretending in private. Public appearances only when needed. No fake intimacy, no pressure. Emma swallowed. So, no kissing for court points? Greg's eyes flicked up, surprised. Then he shook his head. No kissing for court points. Emma's cheeks warmed and she hated it. Greg added quickly, Rule 3, full background checks, on me and on you. Not because I don't believe you, because if we're doing this, we do it smart. Emma's brow furrowed. On me? Greg nodded. If your ex tries to dig up dirt, we should know what he might find before he finds it. That includes misunderstandings, old co-workers, anything. Emma's stomach turned, because the last thing she wanted was anyone digging into that humiliation. Greg saw her expression. Emma, if they fired you unfairly, that story matters. We need to know the truth, and we need to document it. Emma exhaled. Okay. Greg's voice softened. Rule 4, time limit. Emma blinked. Time limit. Greg nodded. This isn't forever unless both people want it to be. But we don't decide that now. We decide what's needed for your custody case. Once you're safe, we reevaluate. Emma's heart thudded. Unless both people want it to be. Why did that sentence feel like a door she shouldn't open? Emma forced her voice neutral. And Rule 5? Greg looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, No lying to Noah. Emma froze. Her hand tightened around the cup. You can't tell him the truth. He's 6. Greg nodded. I'm not saying we tell him legal details. I'm saying we don't play with him like he's a prop. If he's confused, we answer gently. We don't make him feel like love is a costume. Emma stared at Greg, something twisting in her chest. That rule felt like the first truly good thing she'd heard in weeks. Emma swallowed hard. Okay. Greg's gaze softened. Okay. They sat in silence, the kind that wasn't empty anymore. Emma stared at her tea. Then she whispered, I still don't understand how you can trust me enough to offer this. Greg's voice came low. I don't trust you blindly. I trust my instincts. And my instincts are usually right. Emma let out a short laugh. That's not reassuring. Greg's eyes flicked up with a faint smile. I know. That's why we do background checks. Emma shook her head, but the corner of her mouth lifted despite herself. She was startled by it. The barista glanced over, smiling like she was watching something cute happen. Emma quickly dropped her smile, as if she'd been caught. Greg noticed. You don't like people watching you. Emma muttered. I don't like being judged. Greg's gaze sharpened. Who judged you? Emma's throat tightened instantly. She looked down. It doesn't matter. Greg didn't push, but his voice lowered. It matters if it hurts you. Emma's chest tightened so painfully she almost couldn't breathe. She whispered, They made it look like I stole. Greg went still. Emma's voice trembled. I worked my whole life for that career, and they ended it in a room with glass walls so everyone could see. Greg's jaw clenched. Who is they? Emma swallowed hard. My boss, the new CFO, HR. People who smiled at me like it was entertainment. Greg's eyes darkened in a way that made Emma almost recoil, but his voice stayed controlled. What industry? Emma hesitated. Finance. Greg nodded slowly. And your ex is using that against you? Emma's eyes burned. He says if I was fired for theft, I must be unstable. Greg's voice went colder, not toward her, but toward the idea. That's not instability. That's manipulation. Emma let out a shaky breath. Yes. Greg looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, Emma, I don't know you yet, but I know one thing. Emma blinked. What? Greg leaned forward slightly. You're not someone who steals. Emma's throat tightened violently, because hearing someone say it like it was obvious, hit her like oxygen. She looked away fast before he could see tears. Greg's voice softened. When is the next custody hearing? Emma swallowed. 3 weeks. Greg's eyes narrowed. 3 weeks isn't much time. Emma let out a bitter laugh. Tell me about it. Greg took a slow breath. Then, if you choose to do this, we move quickly, but carefully. Emma stared at him. What does quickly mean? Greg's answer came calmly. First, I meet your attorney. Second, we run checks. Third, we establish a believable, respectful timeline. Fourth, if your lawyer approves, we file for a marriage license. Emma's pulse spiked. It sounded too real when he listed it like tasks. Emma whispered, You're really serious? Greg's gaze held hers. Yes. Emma looked down at her hands. Her wedding ring finger was bare. It had been bare for years. She remembered her first marriage, not in detail, but in fragments. The charm, the promises, the slow shift, the control disguised as care. She remembered the night she finally left. Noah asleep in the back seat, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. She remembered thinking, I will never let a man decide my life again. Emma looked up at Greg. If I do this, I keep my independence. Greg nodded immediately. You keep it. Emma's voice sharpened. I don't become someone's possession. Greg's eyes hardened. Never. Emma studied him. And if at any moment I say stop, Greg didn't hesitate. We stop. Emma stared at him, trying to find the crack, because there had to be one. No one offered help like this without a cost, and yet Greg looked like a man who'd learned the cost of doing nothing. Emma's phone buzzed in her pocket. She flinched, pulling it out. A message from her babysitter. Noah asked if you're coming home soon. He wants to show you his drawing. Emma's throat tightened. Greg saw her expression. Your son? Emma nodded. Greg's voice softened. Do you want to go? Emma hesitated, then said quietly, I need to. Greg nodded. Then let me walk you. Emma blinked. You don't have to. Greg's response was simple. I want to. Emma stood, gathering her coat, fingers clumsy. Greg stood too. As Emma put her arms through her sleeves, the strap of her bag slid off her shoulder. She reached to catch it, but her coat sleeve snagged and the bag dropped. Greg moved instantly, catching it mid-fall. Their hands touched briefly, his fingers brushing hers as he handed it back. It was nothing. A second. But Emma felt it like a spark under her skin. She pulled her hand back quickly, heart racing, annoyed with herself. Greg didn't comment. He just held the door again. They stepped into the cold night. The streetlight glow made Greg's breath visible in the air. Emma hugged her coat tighter. You really mean it, don't you? Greg looked at her, eyes steady. Yes? Emma swallowed. Then, if you want to prove you're not dangerous. Greg waited. Emma said, walk me home and keep a distance. No touching. No hero stuff. Greg's mouth twitched. No hero stuff. Got it. Emma started walking. Greg walked beside her, but not too close. Like he was respecting her boundaries even when she didn't say them out loud. Halfway down the block, Emma tripped slightly on a crack in the sidewalk again. She caught herself this time, but muttered, I swear the sidewalks are plotting against me. Greg replied without missing a beat. They heard you might marry me and decided to protest. Emma snorted, a real sound, half laugh, half disbelief. She glanced at him. He was smiling. And for a second, Emma felt something she hadn't felt since before her life collapsed. The dangerous, quiet thought that maybe not everything was over. They walked in silence for a moment. Then Emma whispered, almost to herself, Noah deserves stability. Greg's voice was quiet. So do you. Emma didn't answer, but she didn't tell him to stop walking either. And when they reached her building, she paused at the entrance. Greg stopped a few steps back, as if he didn't want to cross a line. Emma turned to him. The porch light above cast a soft glow over his face, and Emma realized he looked younger here, less guarded. She swallowed. If I say yes, what happens tomorrow? Greg's answer was immediate. Tomorrow you give me your attorney's number, I introduce myself, we do it properly. Emma nodded slowly. And Greg added carefully, "Tomorrow you don't carry this alone for one more day." Emma's breath caught. She forced her voice quiet, controlled. "Good night, Greg." Greg's gaze held hers. "Good night, Emma." Emma turned toward the door. Her hand found the handle. And then she stopped because she felt it. His eyes on her back. Not predatory, not entitled, just present. Emma turned slightly, just enough to glance over her shoulder. Greg was still there, waiting, like he'd meant every word. Emma's chest tightened. She whispered, barely audible, "Tomorrow." Greg nodded once. "Tomorrow." Emma stepped inside, and as the door closed behind her, she leaned her forehead against it, heart pounding, like she'd just run from something, or toward something. She didn't know which, but she knew one thing. Tomorrow, everything might change. The next morning, Emma woke up to the sound of crayons scraping paper and a small voice humming off-key. It was the kind of sound that used to mean normal. Now it meant she had to pretend normal was still possible. She lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, listening. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, thin walls, a heater that clicked like it had opinions. Noah's bedroom door was half open, letting warm light spill into the hallway. Emma's chest tightened. She swung her legs out of bed and stood pulling on a sweatshirt that still smelled faintly like diner coffee and winter air. She padded into the living room. Noah sat cross-legged on the rug, surrounded by a battlefield of crayons. His tongue stuck out slightly as he concentrated, his brow furrowed in that serious way kids get when they feel like their work matters. Emma leaned against the doorway, watching him. For a few seconds she let herself just look. His hair was messy. His pajamas were inside out. There was a smudge of marker on his cheek. He looked safe. And Emma felt something fierce rise inside her chest, something sharp enough to cut through fear. Noah looked up and grinned. "Mom!" Emma smiled and walked over. "Morning, bug." He held up a paper triumphantly. "Look." Emma took it carefully. It was a drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands. One was tall with spiky hair, one was shorter with long hair, one was tiny. Above them, Noah had written in wobbly letters, "Family." Emma's throat tightened. She crouched down beside him. "This is beautiful." Noah beamed. "That's you, that's me, and that's... He paused, looking suspicious. Emma's heart stuttered. "That's who?" Noah squinted at the page like he was solving a mystery. "I don't know. I just felt like drawing another person." Emma forced a light laugh. "Oh, yeah?" Noah nodded. "Maybe it's Grandma, or maybe it's a superhero, but not a scary one." Emma's laugh came out a little shaky. "A friendly superhero." Noah leaned closer, whispering like it was a secret. "A hero who makes pancakes." Emma chuckled despite herself. "That's definitely the best kind." Noah brightened. "Can we have pancakes?" Emma hesitated. "Money. Time." Her shift at the diner started at noon, but Noah was looking at her like pancakes were a promise the universe owed him. Emma kissed his forehead. "We can do pancakes." Noah cheered, throwing both arms up. "Yes!" Emma stood and headed to the tiny kitchen. As she mixed batter, her phone buzzed on the counter. A text message. "Greg, morning. Did you sleep at all?" Emma stared at it, her stomach flipping, annoyed at herself for the way it flipped. She typed back, "Emma, barely. I'm making pancakes. What do you want?" She stared at the screen, then quickly added, "Emma, not for you, for my kid." A second later, Greg replied, "Greg, I figured, but if you ever want backup pancakes, I'm surprisingly good at them." Emma snorted softly, shaking her head. Noah wandered into the kitchen and peered at the phone. "Who's Greg?" Emma froze so hard she nearly dropped the whisk. She turned slowly. "What?" Noah pointed. "It says Greg." Emma tried to keep her voice casual. "That's, someone I met." Noah's eyes went wide with excitement. "A new friend?" Emma swallowed. "Maybe." Noah nodded very seriously, as if he was approving an official application. Okay. Can he make pancakes? Emma blinked, caught off guard. She couldn't help it. She laughed. Noah grinned. I like friends who make pancakes. Emma kissed his hair. You like anyone who gives you food. Noah shrugged. That's true. Emma's chest tightened again, half humor, half ache, because innocence like that was what her ex wanted to poison. She finished the pancakes, flipping them carefully. Noah insisted on pouring syrup himself, which ended exactly as Emma predicted. Syrup everywhere. Noah, Emma groaned, wiping the counter. This is not a syrup-themed art project. Noah giggled. It is now. Emma was laughing, actually laughing, when her phone buzzed again. Another text. Greg, if you're serious about today, send me your attorney's number when you can. No rush. Just whenever feels right. Emma stared at the message. No rush. Yet everything felt like rushing. Noah hummed as he ate, syrup on his lip like a tiny mustache. Mom, you're smiling. Emma blinked. I am? Noah nodded. You do that when we watch funny movies. Emma's throat tightened. She forced her voice light. Then maybe you should make a mess more often. Noah grinned. I can do that. Emma laughed softly, then looked back at her phone. Her finger hovered. She typed Marianne's number into a text, then stopped. Her stomach twisted, because this was the moment it became real. She thought of last night, Greg's steady eyes, his calm voice, the way he caught her bag and stepped back like he didn't want to own a single inch of her space. Emma swallowed hard. Then she hit send. Marianne called within 10 minutes. Emma stepped into the hallway to keep Noah from hearing. Emma, Marianne said, brisk, you texted me a number with no explanation. Emma swallowed. It's someone. A someone, Marianne repeated dryly. Is this about your hypothetical question yesterday? Emma pressed her forehead against the wall. Yes. Marianne exhaled. Tell me everything. Emma's voice shook. I met him at the diner. He overheard me talking to you. He offered to help. He said his sister went through something similar. He wants to... Emma's throat tightened. He wants to marry me, temporarily, strategically. There was a pause. Marianne said slowly, Emma, that sounds either miraculous or dangerous. I know, Emma whispered. Marianne continued, What's his full name? Greg. I don't know his last name yet. Marianne sighed. Emma. I know. Okay, Marianne said, voice shifting into problem-solving mode. I will meet him today in my office. If he refuses, that's a red flag. Emma swallowed. He won't refuse. Good, Marianne said. And Emma? Yes? No secret arrangements, no rushed paperwork. If we do this, we do it clean. Emma nodded, even though Marianne couldn't see. Yes. Marianne paused. And Emma, why do you want to say yes? Emma's throat tightened, because the answer wasn't just Noah. The answer was that for the first time in weeks, someone had looked at her like she wasn't broken. Emma whispered, Because I'm tired. Marianne's voice softened a fraction. Okay, bring him in at 2. Emma swallowed. Okay. She ended the call and stood still for a moment, breathing. Then she walked back into the apartment. Noah looked up from his plate. Mom? Emma forced a smile. Hey, Bug. Noah's eyes narrowed. You did the serious face. Emma blinked. I did. Noah nodded. That face means something big. Emma sat beside him and smoothed his hair gently. Maybe something big, but you're okay. Noah chewed slowly, watching her. Are we in trouble? Emma's chest tightened. She took a breath and chose her words carefully. No, we're not in trouble. We're figuring things out. Noah nodded like he accepted that, but he didn't look fully convinced. He pointed at the drawing again. Maybe the third person is someone who helps us. Emma stared at him. It was a childish sentence, but it felt like fate tapping her shoulder. Emma whispered, Maybe. At 1:30, Emma left Noah with the babysitter and headed downtown, her stomach in knots. Greg texted her the address of Marianne's office and said he'd meet her outside. When Emma arrived, he was already there, standing near the entrance, hands in his coat pockets, looking like he'd been waiting longer than necessary. He spotted her and straightened slightly. Emma walked up, trying to act like this was normal, like she hadn't spent the morning making pancakes while deciding whether to accept the most ridiculous proposal of her life. Greg's gaze softened. "How was your morning?" Emma tried to keep her voice neutral. "Sticky," Greg blinked. "Sticky," Emma sighed. "Pancakes," Greg's mouth twitched into a smile. "Ah, the good kind of sticky." Emma hesitated, then muttered, "Noah asked who you are." Greg's expression shifted. "And?" Emma swallowed. "I said, someone I met." Greg nodded slowly. "That's fair." Emma glanced at him. "You're okay with that?" Greg's gaze held hers. "Emma, your son is the priority. I'm not trying to become someone in his life overnight." Emma's chest tightened again. She looked away quickly. "Good." Greg stepped slightly closer, not invading, just present. "Are you okay?" Emma let out a short laugh. "No." Greg nodded. "Me neither." Emma blinked, surprised. "You're nervous?" Greg's mouth twitched. "I'm about to sit across from a lawyer and to convince her I'm not insane. Yes, I'm nervous." Emma's laugh escaped before she could stop it. Greg smiled, and something warm flickered between them. Then Emma caught herself and looked away, cheeks hot. Greg's smile faded into seriousness. "Emma, if at any point today feels wrong, you say, stop." Emma nodded. "Okay." They walked inside. Marianne's office was sleek and sharp. Glass walls, clean lines, the kind of place that smelled like money and decisions. Marianne stood when they entered, her expression polite but guarded. She was in her 40s, hair pulled back, eyes sharp enough to cut through lies. Greg extended his hand. "Marianne Collins?" Marianne shook his hand firmly. "Yes, and you are?" "Gregory Hale," Greg said. Emma's stomach flipped. Hale. Something about that name felt significant, powerful. Marianne's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Hale? Any relation to Hale Security Solutions?" Greg nodded once. "It's my firm." Emma turned sharply to Greg. "Your firm?" Greg looked at her, apologetic. "I was going to tell you today." Emma's throat tightened. "You own a security firm?" Greg's jaw flexed. "Yes." Marianne's gaze sharpened. "Gregory Hale," she repeated slowly. "That's interesting." Emma's pulse spiked. Marianne gestured toward the chairs. "Sit." Emma sat stiffly. Greg sat beside her, but not too close. Marianne folded her hands. "Mr. Hale, Emma tells me you offered to marry her." Greg nodded calmly. "Yes?" Marianne stared at him like she was watching a bomb and deciding whether to cut the red wire or run. "And you expect me," Marianne said slowly, "to believe this is not coercion, fraud, or a publicity stunt." Greg's gaze didn't waver. "You should not believe it blindly." Marianne's eyes narrowed. "Then why should I believe it at all?" Greg took a slow breath. "Because my sister was destroyed in court by a man who played charming and stable while she looked exhausted and scared. I watched it happen. I don't want to watch it happen again." Marianne studied him. "That's emotion, not legality." Greg nodded. "Legally, I'm offering Emma a documented support system and stability. I'm not asking her to lie. I'm asking her to defend herself with structure." Marianne's gaze flicked to Emma. "Emma? Did you ask him to do this?" Emma swallowed. "No." Marianne's eyes returned to Greg. "Then why did you offer?" Greg's answer was quiet. "Because I overheard her. And because her story sounded like my sister's story. And because I have the resources to help her. And I don't want to be the kind of man who sees injustice and walks away." Marianne's expression didn't soften. It got sharper. "Mr. Hale," Marianne said, Do you understand that if this is exposed as a sham, Emma could lose custody of her child? Greg's gaze hardened. Yes. Marianne leaned forward. So tell me your plan, in detail. Greg nodded once. Background checks, clear timelines, a legitimate marriage license, a shared residence if needed, public appearances only, no fraudulent statements, no false testimony, no exaggeration. Emma stared at Greg, stunned. He sounded like he'd been planning a mission. Marianne's eyes narrowed. Shared residence? Greg's gaze flicked to Emma briefly. Only if it's necessary for legal credibility, and only if Emma agrees. Emma's throat tightened. Marianne leaned back, studying them both. Then she asked the question Emma feared. Why her, Mr. Hale? Greg didn't answer immediately. His gaze shifted to Emma for a fraction of a second, soft, steady. Then he looked back at Marianne. Because when people like her get crushed, Greg said quietly, it teaches everyone else to shut up and accept it. Emma's chest tightened painfully. Marianne watched him for a long moment, then said, I'll run my own checks on you. Greg nodded. You should. Marianne's eyes flicked to Emma. And you, she said firmly, are going to stop making decisions based on desperation. Emma flinched. Marianne continued, voice softer, Emma, I understand why you're considering this. But if you do it with boundaries. Emma swallowed. I know. Marianne sighed and looked back at Greg. If you're serious, I need proof of intent. Proof you're not trying to trap her. Greg nodded. Name it. Marianne's eyes sharpened. A signed agreement, terms, financial disclosure. And I want Emma protected in writing. Greg's answer came without hesitation. Done. Emma stared at him again, heart pounding. Marianne looked between them, then she said, Okay. Emma blinked. Okay? Marianne held up a finger. Not yes, not yet. But, okay. We proceed carefully. You'll both come back tomorrow. We'll draft something. If everything checks out, we consider the legal steps. Emma's stomach flipped. Tomorrow. This was moving too fast, and yet not fast enough. Greg nodded. Thank you. Marianne's gaze softened a fraction. Don't thank me yet, she said. I'm doing this for Emma and her child, not for your hero story. Greg nodded. Understood. Emma swallowed. Marianne stood, signaling the meeting was over. Emma, stay. Greg looked at Emma. I'll wait outside. Emma nodded. Greg stood, and as he passed Emma's chair, his sleeve brushed her shoulder, barely a touch. Emma's skin lit up like it remembered warmth. Greg paused, realizing, and stepped away instantly. Sorry, he murmured. Emma's breath caught. It's okay. Greg's eyes held hers for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Then he walked out. Emma exhaled shakily. Marianne watched her closely. You're already reacting to him, Marianne said bluntly. Emma's cheeks burned. No, I'm not. Marianne arched an eyebrow. Emma looked away. I'm just stressed. Marianne sat back down. Listen to me. Emma swallowed. Marianne's voice turned gentle but firm. This man has power, money, resources. That can protect you or consume you. You need to stay in control. Emma nodded slowly. Marianne added, And Emma, do you feel safe around him? Emma hesitated. Then she whispered, Yes. Marianne studied her, then nodded once. Okay, then we proceed with caution. Emma swallowed. Okay. Marianne's eyes softened slightly. Now, go. Your son is waiting. Emma stood and walked out. Greg was in the hallway, leaning against the wall, hands in his pockets, looking like he was holding himself still. When he saw Emma, he straightened. His voice was quiet. How bad was it? Emma exhaled. She didn't throw you out. Greg blinked. That's good? Emma nodded. It's a start. Greg's shoulders loosened slightly. Okay. Emma looked at him. You own a security firm. Greg grimaced. Yes. Emma frowned. Why didn't you tell me? Greg's gaze held hers. Because I didn't want you to think I was offering help because I wanted something. Emma's chest tightened. She muttered, "And now?" Greg's voice lowered. "Now you can still believe that. Or you can walk away." Emma stared at him. Then she whispered, "I need to pick up Noah." Greg nodded. "Let me drive you." Emma blinked. "I have a car." Greg's mouth twitched. "I didn't say you don't. I said let me drive. Less stress." Emma hesitated. Then she said quietly, "Okay." They walked toward the elevator. As the doors opened, a woman stepped out, tall, polished, wearing heels that sounded expensive. Her eyes flicked to Greg, and her face changed. "Gregory?" she said, voice smooth as velvet. Greg froze. Emma's stomach dropped, because Greg didn't look surprised. He looked annoyed. The woman smiled, slow, calculated, and looked at Emma. "And who is this?" she asked. Greg's voice turned colder. "Vivian!" Emma's pulse spiked. Vivian. The name felt like a warning. Vivian's smile sharpened. "Hello," she said to Emma, sweet as poison. "I didn't realize Greg was bringing company to meetings." Greg's jaw tightened. Emma looked between them, and suddenly she understood. This wasn't just about her ex anymore. Greg had an antagonist, too. Vivian's eyes swept Emma up and down like she was assessing a threat. Then she smiled again. "Well," Vivian said lightly, "I'm sure I'll see you again." Greg's voice was hard. "No!" Vivian's smile didn't falter. "We'll see." She stepped past them, heels clicking away like a countdown. Emma's breath caught. Greg exhaled slowly, like he was forcing himself calm. Emma whispered, "Who was that?" Greg looked at her, eyes dark. Trouble. Emma's stomach twisted, because she already had enough trouble. And yet, something told her this was just beginning. Greg's car was understated, dark, clean, not flashy. The kind of vehicle that didn't announce money, but definitely knew where it was going. Emma slid into the passenger seat and immediately regretted it, not because the seat was too nice. Not because the interior smelled faintly like cedar and clean leather, because the moment the door shut, the space felt intimate in a way she wasn't prepared for. Greg started the engine, hand steady on the wheel. Emma stared out the window. "So, Vivian." Greg's jaw tightened. "Yeah?" Emma waited. Greg exhaled slowly. "She's connected to my work." Emma glanced at him. "That's a vague answer." Greg's mouth twitched, but there was no humor in it. "It's the safest answer." Emma's stomach tightened. "Is she your ex?" Greg's grip on the wheel tightened for a second. "Not exactly." Emma frowned. "Not exactly," Greg sighed. "She's someone who believes she still has a claim on me." Emma's pulse jumped. "And does she?" Greg looked at Emma briefly, eyes steady. "No." Something in his tone, flat, certain, sent a strange little wave of relief through Emma. She hated herself for that. Emma forced her voice sharp. "Then why did she act like she owned the hallway?" Greg's expression darkened. "Because she's used to getting what she wants." Emma's stomach turned. "Great." Greg's eyes flicked to her. "Don't worry." Emma let out a short, humorless laugh. "I'm an expert at worrying." Greg's mouth twitched faintly. "I noticed." They drove in silence for a moment. Emma watched the city blur by. Cold sidewalks, morning traffic, people in coats carrying coffee, like the world was normal. Emma's chest tightened. "Greg? Why do you have enemies?" Greg's eyes stayed on the road. "Everyone has enemies," Emma muttered. "I didn't. Until recently." Greg glanced at her. "You probably did. You just didn't know it yet." Emma swallowed. That felt painfully true. They reached the babysitter's house. Emma unbuckled her seatbelt quickly, eager to get out of the car and back into a reality she understood. Noah's small hands, his chatter, his drawing. But as she opened the door, the wind hit her hard, and her bag slipped off her shoulder again. Emma groaned under her breath. "Of course." She reached for it, but the strap caught on the seatbelt latch, tugging her backward. "Ow!" Greg leaned over instinctively. "Let me—" No, Emma said too fast, then froze because it came out sharp. Greg stopped immediately, hands lifted slightly in surrender. Okay. Emma's cheeks burned. Sorry, I'm trying to keep boundaries. Greg nodded calmly. I respect that. Emma worked the strap free, cheeks still hot, then stepped out. Greg got out too, but stayed near the car. Emma walked to the door and knocked. Noah opened it before the babysitter could, as if he'd been waiting right behind the door. "Mom!" he shouted, launching himself forward. Emma caught him instinctively, hugging him tight. Noah's arms wrapped around her neck. "I missed you." Emma swallowed hard. "I missed you too, bug." Noah pulled back and looked up. "Who's that?" Emma's stomach dropped. She turned slowly. Greg stood by the car, hands in his coat pockets, keeping distance like he'd promised. Noah squinted. "Is that Greg?" Emma froze. Her son recognized the name from her phone. Of course he did. Kids remembered everything. Emma forced a smile. "Yes, that's Greg." Noah's eyes went wide. "The pancake guy?" Emma blinked. She looked at Greg. Greg's eyebrows lifted slightly as if he was trying not to laugh. Emma muttered, "I did not call you the pancake guy." Greg's mouth twitched. "I'm honored." Noah bounced excitedly. "Can he make pancakes?" Emma exhaled. "Noah." Greg took a slow step forward, still keeping space. He lowered himself slightly, so he wasn't towering over Noah. He smiled gently. "Hi, Noah. I'm Greg." Noah stared at him like he was evaluating a new teacher. "Hi." Emma's chest tightened. "Noah, be polite." Noah nodded very seriously. "I am polite. I'm just checking." Greg's eyebrows lifted. "Checking what?" Noah leaned closer, lowering his voice like it was confidential. "If you're nice?" Emma's breath caught. Greg's expression softened. "That's a good thing to check." Noah pointed at Greg's hands. "You have big hands." Emma's cheeks warmed. "Noah," Greg's mouth twitched. "It's true, I do." Noah nodded, satisfied. "Big hands can make big pancakes." Greg blinked, then nodded solemnly. "I can confirm that." Noah grinned. "Okay." Emma stared at the two of them, stunned. She expected fear, confusion, resistance. Instead, Noah was curious, because Noah didn't know how dangerous the world could be yet. Emma swallowed hard. Greg looked up at Emma, his gaze gentle, asking without words, "Is this okay?" Emma nodded slightly. Greg stood and stepped back again, giving space. Noah grabbed Emma's hand and tugged her toward the car. "Can we go home now?" Emma nodded. "Yes, bug." Noah climbed into the back seat, buckling with dramatic effort. Emma slid into the front seat again, her heart still racing. Greg got in, started driving. Noah leaned forward between the seats, face bright with curiosity. "Greg?" Greg glanced in the rearview mirror. "Yeah?" Noah asked. "Are you my mom's friend?" Emma held her breath. Greg answered carefully. "I'm someone who wants to help your mom." Noah blinked. "Why?" Greg's voice was calm. "Because sometimes good people need help." Noah nodded slowly as if that made perfect sense. "Okay." Emma's throat tightened. Noah then asked, "Are you coming for pancakes?" Emma nearly choked. Greg looked at Emma quickly, then back at the mirror. "Maybe someday." Noah cheered. "Yes," Emma muttered under her breath. "This is getting out of hand." Greg's mouth twitched. "It's pancakes. It could be worse." Emma shot him a look. "Don't tempt fate." Greg's eyes softened. "Noted." Back at Emma's apartment, Noah ran inside and immediately started showing Emma his newest masterpiece, a cardboard spaceship with tape holding it together like hope. Emma tried to focus, tried to be present, because her son deserved that. But her mind kept drifting to the hallway. Vivian, the way she'd looked at Emma like Emma was a temporary inconvenience. The way Greg had said her name like a warning. Noah finally ran off to his room to prepare the spaceship for launch, leaving Emma and Greg alone in the living room. The silence hit them. Emma hugged her arms around herself. "You didn't tell me you were, wealthy." Greg's eyebrows lifted. Wealthy? Emma's voice sharpened. You own a security firm, a big one. People recognize your last name. Greg exhaled slowly, then nodded. Yes. Emma's chest tightened. That changes things. Greg's gaze stayed steady. Does it? Emma stared at him. Yes, because men with power don't do things without reasons. Greg's jaw flexed. Emma, I told you my reason. Emma's voice trembled. And I told you I don't trust miracles. Greg was quiet for a moment. Then he said, softer, I'm not a miracle. I'm a man who got tired of watching women be punished for surviving. Emma's stomach twisted, because that sentence landed like truth. Emma looked away, blinking hard. Okay, so what's next? Greg pulled a folded sheet of paper from his coat pocket. Mary Ann asked for terms. I wrote some ideas. Emma blinked, surprised. You wrote them already? Greg's mouth twitched faintly. I'm fast. Emma took the paper and scanned it. It was organized, clear, almost clinical. Living arrangements, optional. Financial support, limited and documented. Public appearances, scheduled. No physical intimacy required. Full autonomy. Exit clause. Emma's throat tightened. Because this wasn't a man trying to trap her. This was a man trying to prove she wasn't trapped. Emma looked up slowly. You wrote an exit clause. Greg nodded. You should always have an exit. Emma swallowed hard. She tried to keep her voice sharp. You're weird. Greg's mouth twitched. I get that a lot. Emma's lips threatened to smile. She fought it. Greg's gaze softened. Emma, I know you're scared, but you don't have to be scared of me. Emma whispered, I'm not just scared of you. Greg waited. Emma's voice trembled. I'm scared of needing you. Greg's expression shifted, something like surprise, then something deeper. He spoke quietly. Then don't need me. Let me support you while you stand on your own. Emma stared at him, chest aching. It sounded too healthy, too mature, too dangerous for her heart. Noah burst back into the room, wearing a towel like a cape. Mom, the spaceship is ready. Emma blinked, snapping back to the moment. Okay, Captain. Noah ran in circles dramatically. We need a co-pilot. Emma glanced at Greg before she could stop herself. Noah followed her gaze and immediately pointed. Greg, you can be co-pilot. Emma froze. Noah? Greg's eyebrows lifted. He looked at Emma, silently asking if he should decline. Emma hesitated. Because saying no would make Noah feel rejected, and saying yes would make Greg feel invited into something she wasn't sure she could handle. Emma swallowed. Just for 5 minutes. Noah cheered. Yes! Greg's mouth twitched. 5 minutes, he agreed. Noah shoved a plastic bowl into Greg's hands like it was a helmet. Greg stared at it solemnly. Is this regulation? Noah nodded intensely. Very. Greg put it on his head. Emma's mouth fell open. It looked ridiculous. Greg looked ridiculous. And for the first time in a long time, Emma laughed so hard she had to cover her mouth. Noah giggled, dancing around them. He's funny. Greg, wearing a bowl on his head, looked at Emma and said deadpan, This is my finest work. Emma laughed again, tears stinging her eyes. And that was the moment it happened. Emma felt it. Not love. Not yet. But the first dangerous, tender crack in the wall. The realization that Greg wasn't just offering stability. He was offering light. And Emma hadn't realized how dark it had gotten until a stranger walked in wearing a plastic bowl and made her son laugh. Later, when Greg finally stood to leave, Noah followed him to the door. Noah looked up. Greg? Greg knelt slightly. Yeah? Noah asked, Are you coming back? Emma held her breath. Greg glanced at Emma first, respectful, careful. Emma's chest tightened. She nodded once, barely. Greg looked back at Noah. If your mom says it's okay, then yes. Noah grinned. Okay. Greg stood, opened the door, then paused and looked at Emma. His voice was quiet. Tomorrow at Mary Ann's. 10? Emma nodded. 10. Greg hesitated, then said softly, "You did good today." Emma's throat tightened. "I didn't do anything." Greg shook his head. "You let someone near your son. That's not nothing." Emma stared at him, caught off guard. Greg added quietly, "Good night, Emma." Emma whispered, "Good night." Greg stepped out. Emma closed the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. Noah looked up at her. "Mom?" Emma swallowed. "Yes, Bug?" Noah said, very casually. "I think Greg is nice." Emma's chest tightened. She forced a smile. "You just like his pancakes." Noah frowned. He didn't even make pancakes yet. Emma blinked. Noah shrugged. "I can just tell." Emma stared at her son. And suddenly she realized the scariest part of all. Noah wasn't the only one who could tell, because Emma could tell too, even if she didn't want to. That night Emma barely slept. Not because she was afraid. Because she kept thinking about Greg, wearing a bowl on his head, making Noah laugh, looking at Emma like her pain mattered. And because somewhere deep inside her, a new fear was blooming. If this marriage started as a strategy, what happened if her heart didn't get the memo? The agreement took shape the next morning like something unreal becoming solid. Words turned into clauses, clauses into protection. Emma sat at Marianne's long glass table, a pen between her fingers, staring at a document that was supposed to keep her life from unraveling. Across from her, Greg sat still, composed, listening as Marianne explained each line with surgical precision. "This clause," Marianne said, tapping the page, "ensures financial independence. No joint accounts unless legally required. Emma retains full control." Greg nodded. "As written." Emma glanced at him, searching for hesitation. There was none. Marianne continued, "This clause outlines public representation only. No false testimony, no fabricated history." Greg didn't even blink. "Agreed." Emma's heart pounded, not from fear this time, but from something stranger. Trust, building too quickly. Marianne leaned back. "And this," she pointed again, "the exit clause. Either party may terminate the agreement at any time, with no retaliation." Emma swallowed. "At any time?" Greg's voice was steady. "At any time." Marianne studied him. "You understand that puts you at a disadvantage." Greg looked at Emma. She should never feel trapped. Emma's breath caught. Marianne's eyes softened, just a fraction. "All right." She slid the paper toward Emma. "Read it one more time." Emma did. Every word felt heavy. Every word felt like a lifeline. Her name sat at the top of the page, followed by Greg's. Two strangers, one strategy, and something unspoken pulsing beneath it. Emma set the paper down. "If we do this, we do it clean." Greg nodded. "Always." Emma lifted her gaze. "No games, no pressure." Greg met her eyes. "None." Marianne folded her hands. "Then we proceed." Emma's hand shook as she signed. Greg signed right after, his handwriting controlled, deliberate. The pen clicked softly when he set it down. Marianne exhaled. "All right, step one is done." Emma blinked. "That was step one?" Marianne gave her a dry smile. "Welcome to legal chess." Greg stood. "What's next?" Marianne looked at Emma. "A public appearance. Something casual, something normal." Emma's stomach tightened. "Normal?" Marianne nodded. "People talk. Judges notice patterns. We need witnesses who can say, 'Yes, I've seen them together.'" Emma swallowed. "Like what?" Marianne shrugged. "Dinner? A community event? Somewhere visible?" Greg's eyes flicked to Emma. "Your call." Emma hesitated. The idea of pretending in public, of being watched, made her skin prickle. But then she thought of Noah, of the way her ex smiled when he thought he was winning. Emma squared her shoulders. "Okay." Greg nodded once. "Okay." Marianne added, "And Emma?" Emma looked at her. "Remember," Marianne said gently, "this is a strategy. Don't confuse momentum with certainty." Emma nodded, even though something in her chest resisted that sentence. The restaurant Greg chose was quiet, understated, full of warm light and low voices, not fancy enough to attract attention, not hidden enough to be suspicious. Emma stood outside, adjusting her coat, nerves buzzing. Greg stepped up beside her. "You don't have to do this tonight." Emma shook her head. "Yes, I do." Greg studied her. "Why?" Emma met his gaze. "Because if I wait until I feel brave, I'll never move." Greg nodded slowly. "Then I'm with you." They walked in together. A hostess smiled. "Table for two?" Greg glanced at Emma, giving her the choice. Emma nodded. "Yes," Greg said. The hostess led them to a corner table. Emma sat, hands folded in her lap, hyper-aware of everything. How close Greg's knee was to hers, how his arm brushed the back of her chair when he pulled it out. Accidental, careful, still electric. They ordered. Small talk came easily, too easily. Greg asked about Noah's favorite movies. Emma teased Greg about the bowl helmet. Greg admitted he hadn't laughed like that in years. The server smiled knowingly as she refilled their water. Emma noticed. Her stomach twisted. Greg noticed too. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "If this feels like too much, say the word." Emma swallowed. "It's okay." Greg searched her face. That wasn't confident. Emma exhaled. "I'm just not used to being looked at like this." Greg frowned. "Like what?" Emma gestured vaguely. "Like someone wants to be here." Greg's voice softened. "I do want to be here." Emma's breath hitched. She looked down quickly. For a moment, neither spoke. And then, because life liked irony, Emma's ex walked in. She recognized him instantly. The posture, the charm, the way he scanned the room like it belonged to him. Emma's stomach dropped. Her hand tightened around her napkin. Greg noticed immediately. "What is it?" he asked quietly. Emma whispered, "That's him." Greg's body went still, not tense, not aggressive, alert. "Your ex?" he murmured. Emma nodded. The man laughed at something the woman beside him said, placing a hand at her back, like ownership. Emma's chest burned. Greg didn't look at the man. He looked at Emma, and then, deliberately, calmly, he reached across the table and rested his hand over Emma's, not gripping, not claiming, just present, warm, steady. Emma froze. Her instinct screamed to pull away. Her heart screamed not to. Greg's thumb brushed her knuckles once, soft, grounding. Emma's breathing slowed. The man's gaze swept the room, and then it landed on them. Emma felt it like a spotlight. Her ex paused, smiled. Then he walked over. "Well," he said smoothly, "this is unexpected." Emma's spine straightened. Greg didn't remove his hand. "Hello," Greg said calmly. The man looked between them. "And you are?" Greg met his gaze. "Greg." The man's smile sharpened. "Friend?" Greg glanced at Emma, just a fraction, then back at him. "Husband," Greg said evenly. The word hit Emma like thunder. "Husband." The man laughed softly. "Really?" Greg didn't flinch. "Yes." The man's eyes flicked to Emma. "You move fast." Emma lifted her chin. "You always said I was decisive." The man's smile faltered, just a crack. "Congratulations," he said lightly. "I'm happy for you." His eyes said the opposite. Greg's hand stayed steady over Emma's. The man nodded once and walked away. Emma exhaled shakily. Greg leaned closer. "You okay?" Emma whispered. "You said it like it was real." Greg's voice was low. "It is real. Legally." Emma swallowed. Something in her chest twisted painfully. They finished dinner quietly after that. Outside, the cold air hit Emma hard. She wrapped her arms around herself. Greg hesitated, then gently placed his coat around her shoulders. Emma froze, but didn't stop him. His hands lingered for half a second, too long, not intentional, not careless, just human. She whispered, "Thank you." Greg's voice was soft. "Anytime." They stood there, close enough to feel each other's breath. And for a heartbeat, it felt less like pretending. If this story is touching you in some way, you're not alone. Stories like this are made for people who still believe connection can appear when you least expect it. Emma stepped back first. She cleared her throat. "We should go." Greg nodded. "Yeah." 2 days later, Vivian made her move. Emma didn't see it coming. She was at the diner mid-shift when her manager approached, face tight. "Emma," he said quietly, "there's a woman here asking about you." Emma's stomach dropped. "About me?" "She says she represents someone." Emma turned. Vivian stood near the counter, immaculate, smiling like she owned the floor. Emma's pulse spiked. Vivian's eyes met hers, and Vivian smiled wider. Vivian sat across from Emma in the empty booth like she was conducting an interview. "I won't take much of your time," Vivian said sweetly. "I just wanted to understand." Emma's voice was tight. "Understand what?" Vivian tilted her head. "You." Emma crossed her arms. "There's nothing to understand." Vivian chuckled softly. "Oh, there always is." She leaned in. "Greg has a pattern." Emma's stomach twisted. "I'm not interested in your opinion." Vivian's smile sharpened. "You should be." Emma held her ground. "Why are you here?" Vivian's gaze flicked to the kitchen, then back. "Because Greg doesn't bring people into his life lightly, and yet here you are." Emma's voice trembled despite herself. "You don't know anything about me." Vivian nodded. "I know enough." She slid a photo across the table. Emma's breath caught. It was a still from the office footage, the day Emma was fired. Vivian's voice was silk. "Funny thing about reputations, they follow you." Emma's hands shook. "Where did you get that?" Vivian smiled. "I have resources." Emma's chest burned. "You had no right." Vivian leaned back. "I'm offering advice." Emma laughed bitterly. "Advice?" Vivian's eyes went cold. "Walk away from Greg. He doesn't need this kind of complication." Emma's heart pounded. "You're threatening me." Vivian smiled sweetly. "I'm protecting him." Emma stood abruptly. "Get out." Vivian rose gracefully. "Think about it." She paused. "Men like Greg don't choose women like you." Emma's breath hitched. Vivian leaned in one last time. "They rescue them until it becomes inconvenient." Then she walked out. Emma stood there shaking. Her manager approached. "Everything okay?" Emma forced a smile that hurt. "Yes." But inside, something cracked. That night, Emma didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, Vivian's words echoing. "Men like Greg don't choose women like you." She picked up her phone, typed, stopped, then finally sent. "Emma, Vivian came to see me." The reply came instantly. "Greg, where are you?" Emma's throat tightened. "Emma, at home, I'm fine." There was a pause, then, "Greg, I'm coming over." Emma stared at the screen. Her fingers hovered. Then she typed, "Emma." "Okay." Greg arrived 15 minutes later. He stood in the doorway, jaw tight, eyes searching her face. "What did she say?" he asked quietly. Emma told him everything. When she finished, her voice broke. "Maybe she's right." Greg's eyes darkened. "She's not." Emma swallowed. "She said you don't choose women like me." Greg stepped closer, slowly, deliberately. "Emma," he said softly, "I didn't choose you because you're convenient. I chose you because you're strong, because you're honest, because you fight." Emma's eyes filled. "You don't know me." Greg's voice lowered. "I know enough." He stopped inches away, not touching, waiting. Emma's breath shook. "Greg," she whispered. He hesitated. "Tell me to stop." Emma didn't. She closed the distance instead. Her hands rested lightly against his chest. His breath hitched. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Greg whispered, "This changes things." Emma's voice trembled. "I know." He waited. Emma tilted her face up. Their lips met, soft, hesitant, real, not strategic, Not planned, just two people crossing a line they pretended didn't exist. When they pulled back, both were breathing hard. Greg rested his forehead against hers. "We can't pretend anymore." Emma nodded, tears slipping free. "I don't want to." And in that moment, the marriage stopped being only a strategy and became something dangerous, something real. The kiss changed nothing, and it changed everything. They stood there for a long second afterward, foreheads still touching, both breathing like they'd run too far without noticing. Greg was the first to step back, not because he wanted to, because he had to. "This complicates things," he said quietly. Emma let out a shaky laugh. "That's one way to put it." Greg searched her face. "Emma, I need to know something." Her chest tightened. "Okay." "Was that because you were scared?" he asked. "Or because you wanted it?" Emma didn't answer right away. "Because the truth scared her more than Vivian ever could." She swallowed. "Both." Greg nodded slowly. "Then we slow down." Emma frowned. "Slow down?" "Yes," he said gently. "We don't let fear decide intimacy, and we don't let attraction override your safety." Emma stared at him, conflicted. "You're saying that after kissing me?" Greg's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "I didn't say I was immune." Emma shook her head softly. "You're impossible." Greg met her eyes. "So are you." They stood there in silence again, this time heavier, charged. Then Noah's bedroom door creaked open. Emma froze. Noah stepped out, rubbing one eye. "Mom?" Emma's heart jumped. "Hey, Bug?" Noah looked at Greg, then at Emma, then back at Greg. "Is everything okay?" Emma swallowed. "Yes, everything's okay." Noah yawned. "Okay." He turned to go back to bed, then paused. "Greg?" Greg lowered himself slightly so he wasn't towering. "Yeah, buddy?" Noah asked, sleepy but sincere. "Are you staying?" Emma's breath caught. Greg didn't look at her this time. He answered Noah honestly. "Not tonight." Noah nodded, accepting it without question. "Okay." He shuffled back to his room. Emma exhaled slowly. Greg straightened. That was the right answer. Emma nodded, throat tight. "Thank you." Greg hesitated at the door. "I should go." Emma didn't argue, but when Greg reached for the handle, she spoke. "Greg?" He turned. Her voice was quiet. "I meant what I said." Greg's gaze softened. So did I. He left. Emma locked the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't afraid of being alone. She was afraid of how much she wasn't. The custody hearing came faster than Emma expected. The courtroom was cold, all pale wood and quiet judgment. Emma sat beside Greg, legally, publicly, undeniably her husband. Greg's hand rested on the arm of the chair between them, not touching her, but close enough to feel. Across the room, her ex sat with his lawyer, confidence radiating from him like a performance. Vivian sat 2 rows behind him. Emma's stomach tightened. Greg leaned in slightly, voice low. "Eyes on me." Emma glanced at him. Greg's gaze was steady. "You're not alone." Emma inhaled and nodded. The hearing began. Her ex spoke smoothly. His lawyer painted Emma as unstable, impulsive, unreliable. Greg didn't react. Emma's hands trembled. Then it was their turn. Marianne stood calm and precise. She presented documents, employment records, evidence that Emma's firing was under investigation. Then she gestured toward Greg. "And this," Marianne said, "is Emma's husband." Greg stood. The room seemed to shift. He didn't posture, didn't perform. He simply told the truth. "I married Emma because she is a good mother," Greg said evenly, "because she was treated unfairly, and because stability isn't something she lacks. It's something she was denied." The judge listened. Emma's ex smiled, until Marianne presented the final document, a sealed report, evidence that the CFO who fired Emma had manipulated footage and that Vivian had helped bury complaints. Vivian's smile vanished. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently. The judge's expression hardened. The room felt like it was holding its breath. After a long moment, the judge spoke. "Custody remains with the mother." Emma's breath left her in a rush. "And," the judge added, "this court recommends further investigation into the termination of Ms. Carter's employment." Vivian stood abruptly. The judge's gavel came down. "Sit down, Ms. Hale." The name echoed. Hale. Emma turned slowly to Greg. Vivian Hale. Greg's jaw tightened. Emma finally understood. Vivian wasn't just connected to his work. She was family. Later, outside the courthouse, Emma confronted him. "You never told me she was your sister-in-law." Greg nodded. "She married my brother." "He's like your ex." Emma's chest tightened. "You protected me from that." Greg met her eyes. "I protected Noah." Emma swallowed hard. Vivian passed them, face pale, fury burning behind her eyes. "This isn't over," she hissed. Greg didn't even look at her. "It is." Weeks passed. Emma got her job back, publicly cleared. The diner became temporary again. Life steadied, and the marriage didn't dissolve. One evening, after Noah was asleep, Emma sat beside Greg on the couch. No contracts. No court dates. Just quiet. Emma whispered, "We can end this now." Greg looked at her. "Do you want to?" Emma shook her head. "Do you?" Greg reached for her hand, this time without hesitation. "No," he said. Emma's eyes filled. "Neither do I." She leaned in. This kiss was different. No fear, no urgency, just choice. When they pulled back, Greg smiled softly. "I never planned to fall in love." Emma laughed quietly. "Me neither." He rested his forehead against hers. "But I did." Emma whispered, "So did I." And in the next room, Noah slept peacefully, secure, loved, safe. Exactly where he belonged. If you stayed until the end, thank you for feeling this story with us. Stories like this are made for those who still believe in connection, justice, and second chances. If this story touched you, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps us continue telling stories like this. And before you go, tell us in the comments. From 0 to 10, how much did this story move you?